The gas station fluorescents cast harsh shadows across the old woman's face as the officer's hand closes around her purse. No warrant, no reason. Just power unquestioned for generations. In the darkness beyond the light, a phone camera records what no complaint form ever captured. They say the most dangerous person in any room is the quiet one, the watcher, the one who absorbs every injustice without reaction, storing it like ammunition for a war not yet declared. I was trained to end enemies without leaving fingerprints, to move through hostile territory undetected, to understand systems before dismantling them. In the military, they called me Shadow, but shadows merely follow. What I became when I returned home was something far more dangerous, a mirror, reflecting back the corruption that had poisoned my hometown for decades. Some fights begin with gunfire, some with protest. This one began with silence, deliberate, tactical, unnerving. And silence, when wielded by someone who knows how power truly works, can bring down entire systems without firing a single shot. The night air hung heavy over the rural gas station. A single flickering light cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, illuminating only what it had. To the rest remained, swallowed by darkness. In that darkness, secrets thrived. Martha Jenkins stood perfectly still, her weathered hands gripping her worn purse. At 73, she had seen enough of the world to know when to speak and when silence served better. This moment demanded silence. Officer Bennett loomed over her, his police badge catching what little light existed. His presence wasn't about protection, it was about power. Same time every month, Martha. Bennett's voice cut through the night. You'd think after all these years you'd learn. Martha's eyes remained fixed on the ground. Her silence wasn't submission, it was survival. Let me see that purse. When she hesitated, Bennett snatched it from her hands. The violence wasn't in the action itself, but in the casualness of it, as if her dignity was so irrelevant, it didn't even require effort to violate. $230. Bennett counted aloud, removing several bills. Social Security came through nicely this month. He pocketed $50, then tossed the purse back. Martha caught it without looking up. Mileage tax, he smirked, for keeping an eye on your neighborhood. Martha nodded once, reclaiming her purse with quiet dignity. Each month you learn a new lesson, don't you? Bennett's voice carried a warning. The lesson is always the same, though some things never change in Pinecrest. What Bennett didn't notice was the small phone camera lens reflecting moonlight from the shadows by the air pump. The device was steady, recording every moment, every word. Nathan Reed stood motionless in those shadows. His breathing remained measured and controlled, a skill learned through years of military discipline. His eyes weren't filled with rage. They were cold, calculating, observant. These were the eyes of someone who had seen worse, but recognized the familiar pattern of abused power. He lowered the phone only when Bennett's patrol car disappeared around the corner. Only then did he allow himself to exhale. I was once Shadow, that's what they called me. I know how to end an enemy without ever touching them. The thought came to Nathan as he drove Martha home, neither speaking during the short journey. Words weren't necessary between them. Shared blood and shared pain created its own language. Back in his motel room, Nathan placed the phone on the nightstand. The video evidence joined dozens of others, small fragments of a larger truth he was assembling piece by piece. The letter from his mother sat open beside a half-empty glass of whiskey. Unlike her usual lengthy correspondence filled with community gossip and family updates, this one contained a single line. They aren't taking my money. They're taking the silence I once believed would protect me. That single sentence had been enough to bring Nathan Reed back to Pinecrest after 8 years away. 8 years of trying to forget this place. 8 years of nightmares that had nothing to do with war and everything to do with home. Sleep didn't come easily that night. It never did anymore. The ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, creating shadows that morphed into memories he'd rather forget. When exhaustion finally claimed him, his dreams were filled with desert heat shouting commands, and the moment that had defined his military career, the moment he had said no. Morning in Pinecrest arrived with deceptive beauty. Sunlight filtered through pine trees that gave the town its name, casting dappled patterns across Main Street storefronts. To visitors, it looked like a picture-perfect American small town, the kind featured in travel magazines and feel-good movies. Nathan knew better. He parked his rental car across from the sheriff's department and watched. 3 hours of observation told him what he needed to know: shift changes, personnel counts, security cameras. Old habits from his military days. Gather intelligence before engaging. His phone vibrated with a text message from Thomas Gray. Coffee Mabel's Diner, noon. Thomas had been the only one who'd reached out after Nathan's dishonorable discharge, the only one who'd bothered to ask what really happened in Syria. Nathan typed a simple response: "I'll be there. Here you." Mabel's Diner hadn't changed in nearly a decade. Same cracked vinyl booths, same pictures of local high school football champions on the walls, same division between who sat where. Some segregations remained unspoken but understood. Thomas was already waiting when Nathan arrived, nursing a cup of coffee that had likely gone cold. Time had been both kind and cruel to Thomas. His face carried more lines, but his eyes still held the same steady intelligence that had made him the best English teacher Pinecrest High had ever known. "You look like hell," Thomas said by way of greeting. "And you look exactly the same," Nathan replied, sliding into the booth. A waitress approached, eyed Nathan with curiosity that bordered on suspicion, then took his order for black coffee. Small towns never forgot a face, especially one that left under a cloud. "Your mother wouldn't tell me why you've come back," Thomas said once they were alone. "But I can guess." Nathan remained silent, a habit that had become second nature during his years in Special Forces. Let others fill the silence, you learn more that way. "Bennett," Thomas finally said, keeping his voice low. "It's gotten worse since you left." The name alone was enough to tighten Nathan's jaw. Officer James Bennett had been a fixture in Pinecrest Police Department for as long as Nathan could remember. The man who'd pulled over every black teenager driving anything nicer than a 10-year-old sedan. The man who'd conducted random searches that somehow only randomized among certain households. "He's not just a cop anymore," Thomas continued. "He's the system. Sheriff Freeman lets him run the East Side however he wants as long as the arrest numbers look good." "And no one says anything?" Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Thomas' laugh held no humor. Who would they tell? The same department that hired him? The same town council that looks the other way? "You've been gone, Nathan. You don't know how deep it goes." Nathan took a sip of his coffee, giving himself time to control the anger rising in his chest. "I need to know something, Thomas. The rumors about Bennett's military service, are they true?" Thomas glanced around before leaning forward. "More than rumors. My nephew works at the VA in Charleston. Bennett was in Iraq, same time you were in Afghanistan. There was an incident with a local boy. Torture. The military buried it, gave him an honorable discharge, and sent him home with a recommendation for law enforcement." The information settled like lead in Nathan's stomach. Not surprising, but confirmation nonetheless. "What are you planning to do?" Thomas asked, studying Nathan's face. "Because if it's what I think, you should know something first. Bennett has friends, powerful friends, the kind that can make people disappear with paperwork." Nathan placed cash on the table for their coffees. "I'm not planning anything yet, just visiting my mother." It wasn't a complete lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Thomas didn't push. "Your mother's a good woman. She's been through enough." As Nathan stood to leave, Thomas caught his arm. "One more thing you should know. Bennett served with a unit that was stationed near yours in Syria. The timing matches when you—" He paused, searching for the right words. "When you made your choice." Nathan froze. "You're sure? Military records don't lie, at least not the ones my nephew can access." The pieces were beginning to form a pattern, one Nathan wasn't sure he wanted to see. Martha Reed's home sat at the edge of Pine Creek, the predominantly black neighborhood on the east side of town. The modest single-story house had been in the family for 3 generations, its white paint fading but meticulously maintained. The garden, filled with collard greens and tomato plants, spoke of Martha's determination to remain self-sufficient even as age bent her back. She was watering those plants when Nathan pulled into the driveway. For a moment, watching her from the car, Nathan could pretend the last 8 years hadn't happened, that he was just coming home from college, not returning from disgrace, and a life he'd tried to rebuild far from here. You gonna sit there all day or are you coming in for lunch? Martha called without turning around. Nathan smiled despite himself. His mother had always had eyes in the back of her head. Inside the house smelled of cornbread and sweet tea, the sense of Nathan's childhood. Photos lined the walls, Nathan in his high school graduation gown, Nathan in his military uniform, Nathan with his father before cancer took him 15 years ago. A visual timeline of the man Martha had raised alone. They ate in comfortable silence until Martha finally spoke. You saw him last night. It wasn't a question. Nathan nodded. How long has he been taking money from you? Martha set down her fork. 5 years. Started small, $20 here and there. Said it was for community protection. Then it became regular. Monthly. Why didn't you tell me? The look Martha gave him was filled with a mother's protection. And what would you have done? Come back here with your career on the line, fight a battle that would only hurt you worse. Nathan pushed his plate away, appetite gone. You should have told me. I'm telling you now, Martha said simply. Not because I want you to fix it, because I want you to understand why I finally sent that letter. Shamin. She rose and went to a drawer in the kitchen, returning with a small stack of papers. These are complaints filed against Bennett, 37 in total, not just from me, from everyone in Pine Creek he's been taxing. Nathan flipped through the papers, each one a form, with the sheriff department's letterhead, each one marked unsubstantiated in red ink. Every month I filed one, Martha continued. Every month nothing changed. I wasn't the only one, but we were all just shouting into a void. So why now? Nathan asked. Why call me home now? Martha's eyes, so like his own, filled with tears she refused to let fall. Because last month he took something from Shanice Williams' girl. Not money. Nathan's blood ran cold. Did he? No, Martha said quickly. The girl fought back. He didn't go through with it, but he threatened her. Said next time she wouldn't be so lucky. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken rage. That's when I knew, Martha said softly. Our silence isn't protecting us anymore. It's protecting him. That night, Nathan drove through Pinecrest, relearning the geography of his hometown. Some things had changed: a new strip mall on the west side, a shuttered factory on the north end. But the invisible lines that divided the town remained exactly as he remembered. He parked on a hill overlooking the town, pulled out a notebook, and began creating a map, not of streets and buildings, but of power. Who answered to whom? Where the money flowed? Which officers patrolled which neighborhoods? A text from his mother interrupted his work. Pastor Williams wants to meet you. Church. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Nathan hadn't set foot in Bethel AME Church since his father's funeral. Churches made him uncomfortable now. Too many prayers gone unanswered. Too many promises of justice deferred to another world. But Pastor Williams had been his father's best friend. Some invitations couldn't be declined. The church stood as it always had, a simple white building with a steeple that reached toward heaven with more hope than the town below it deserved. Inside, the wooden pews gleamed with decades of polishing, and stained glass windows cast colored light across the worn carpet. Pastor Williams waited in his office, older now, but with the same commanding presence that had made him both respected and feared in equal measure. He had been a civil rights activist in his youth, marched with King, and carried the scars of that fight both on his body and in his soul. Nathan Reed, he said, rising to embrace him. You've been gone too long. Yes, sir, Nathan replied, the respect automatic even after all these years. Sit, sit, Pastor Williams gestured to a chair. Your mother tells me you've come home to deal with our Bennett problem. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. The pastor studied him. I heard about what happened in Syria. Not the official story, the real one. Nathan tensed. How? God works in mysterious ways, Pastor Williams said with a small smile. And so does the internet if you know where to look. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a military report, heavily redacted, but with enough visible text for Nathan to recognize it. His own case file. Where did you get this? Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A journalist friend. She was investigating war crimes. Found your name listed as Removed from duty due to tactical incompatibility. Funny way of saying you refuse to fire on civilians. Nathan closed the folder. Those memories live too close to the surface these days. The village outside Damascus. The intelligence that claimed it harbored terrorists. The families he could see through his scope, children playing, women hanging laundry. The direct order to fire, his finger refusing to pull the trigger. That was a different life, Nathan said. Was it? Pastor Williams leaned forward. Or was it the same man making the same choice to stand between power and the powerless? Nathan didn't answer. There's something else you should see, Pastor Williams continued, producing another folder. This one took more divine intervention to obtain. Inside was a military service record for James Bennett. Most was standard enlistment dates, deployment locations, discharge status. But one section had been highlighted, disciplinary action, sealed. My contact couldn't get what was in the seal section, Pastor Williams explained, but she found this. He placed a photocopy of a letter on the desk. Official letterhead from the Sheriff's Department of Pinecrest County signed by Sheriff Michael Freeman. In regard to applicant James Bennett, I have reviewed the sealed portion of his military record and find that the incidents therein do not disqualify him from service in our department. His tactical experience in high-stress situations will be an asset to our community. Nathan read it twice. Freeman knew. Whatever Bennett did overseas, Freeman knew, and hired him anyway. Not just hired him, Pastor Williams corrected, protected him, promoted him, gave him authority over the very people he was most likely to abuse. Nathan stood, needing to move. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. What are you asking me to do, Pastor? Nothing violent, Pastor Williams said firmly. Violence is their language, not ours, but there are other ways to fight, such as information, evidence, the truth brought to light in a way they can't ignore or bury. Nathan laughed bitterly. You think they care about the truth as you've been filing complaints for years. What's changed? Pastor Williams rose, his tall frame still imposing despite his age. What's changed is you, son. You know how systems work, how to observe without being seen, how to gather intelligence that can't be denied. I was a soldier, not a spy. You were special forces, Pastor Williams countered. You were trained to work in hostile territory, to gather information, to complete missions without leaving fingerprints. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone. I'm asking you to help us expose what's been happening. The request hung in the air between them. Think about it, Pastor Williams said, moving toward the door. That's all I ask. And while you're thinking, you might want to check the county records office. Look up how many property seizures have happened in Pine Creek in the last 5 years. How many drug-related arrests ended with homes being confiscated, then sold to developers at a fraction of their value. Nathan followed him out of the office, mind already calculating angles, approaches, vulnerabilities, the tactical assessment happening automatically. One more thing, Pastor Williams said as they reached the church entrance. Whatever you decide, remember this: if you fight monsters with their own weapons, you risk becoming what you hate. The county records office was housed in a gray building downtown, its windows dusty and its air conditioning struggling against the southern heat. The clerk eyed Nathan suspiciously when he requested property seizure records for the last 5 years, but couldn't legally deny him access. What he found confirmed his worst suspicions. 63 properties seized in Pine Creek, all from Black or Hispanic owners. 47 later sold to Pinecrest Development Corporation, a company that, with further digging, Nathan discovered was partially owned by Sheriff Freeman's brother-in-law. The pattern wasn't just about petty extortion or racist harassment. It was systematic displacement, using the badge to clear valuable land for future development. Nathan photographed key documents with his phone, his mind already formulating connections, weak points, pressure areas. This was how he'd been trained to think: identify the enemy's structure, find its vulnerabilities, plan the approach. A text message interrupted his thoughts. Bennett on patrol in Pine Creek tonight, 8 p.m., 4 a.m. Thomas, keeping his promise to help. Nathan parked 3 blocks away from his observation point, approached on foot through backyards and side streets, moving without being seen, another military skill that had become second nature. The abandoned water tower gave him a perfect vantage point over the eastern section of Pine Creek. Through high-powered binoculars, he tracked Bennett's patrol car as it moved through the neighborhood, stopping randomly at homes conducting checks that involved no paperwork, just intimidation, and sometimes cash changing hands. Nathan documented everything: times, addresses, license plates of other officers who occasionally joined Bennett. He was building a map of corruption, a foundation for whatever would come next. Just after midnight, Bennett's patrol car stopped outside a small house Nathan recognized: the Williams family home. Shanice Williams was a single mother raising two teenagers. Her daughter Kiara was 16. Nathan tensed as Bennett approached the house, flashlight sweeping across the front windows. This wasn't a normal patrol stop. The officer's body language was different, predatory. Before Nathan could decide what to do, the front door opened. Shanice Williams stood in the doorway, her posture defiant despite being half Bennett's size. Through his binoculars, Nathan could see their confrontation clearly, though he couldn't hear the words. Bennett gesturing aggressively, Shanice refusing to step aside. Bennett's hand moving to his holster, not drawing, but making sure she saw the threat. Nathan's hand tightened around his binoculars. Every instinct told him to intervene, but that wasn't the mission. Not yet. The standoff ended when another patrol car turned onto the street, its headlights illuminating the scene. Bennett backed away, pointing at Shanice in a clear warning before returning to his vehicle. Nathan exhaled slowly, his heart racing despite his outward calm. This was worse than he'd imagined. More organized, more deliberate. A system, not just one bad officer. As he made his way back to his car, a new thought formed, one that connected his past to this present moment. What if his discharge hadn't been random? What if Bennett's connection to his former unit wasn't coincidence? What if coming home had been inevitable all along? The next morning, Nathan visited the Pinecrest Public Library. The building had been his sanctuary as a child, a place where knowledge offered escape from a town too small for his dreams. Now it served a different purpose. The library's free computers provided anonymous internet access. From there, Nathan contacted former military connections, people who owed him favors, people who understood that sometimes the real enemy wore a friendly uniform. One reply came almost immediately. File attached, heavily encrypted. Password is where we met. Be careful, Shadow. Some ghosts don't want to be found. The attached file took nearly an hour to download and decrypt. When it finally opened, Nathan stared at the screen in disbelief. It was a military intelligence report, one he'd never seen before. It detailed the aftermath of his refusal to fire in Syria. But rather than focusing on Nathan's insubordination, it analyzed the tactical situation on the ground and concluded that the intelligence that had led to the strike order had been deliberately falsified. The village had contained no terrorists. The strike would have killed innocent civilians. And the officer who had provided the falsified intelligence and given the order to fire Captain James Anders, Bennett's commanding officer in Iraq. The connection wasn't just coincidence, it was retaliation. Nathan had been made an example of the soldier who questioned orders, who refused to pull the trigger. His discharge had been meant as a warning to others, and Bennett, with his history of brutality, had been rewarded for his compliance. The system didn't just protect men like Bennett, it created them, nurtured them, deployed them. Nathan closed the file and cleared the browser history. He had what he needed now, not just evidence of local corruption, but understanding of its roots. The pattern extended far beyond Pinecrest. As he left the library, his phone vibrated with a text from Martha. Come home now. Martha was waiting on the porch when Nathan pulled into the driveway, her face set in lines of worry that deepened when she saw him. What happened? He asked, taking the porch steps two at a time. Sheriff Freeman came by? Martha said, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. Asked a lot of questions about why you're back in town. Said he'd heard you were investigating things that weren't your concern. Nathan's jaw tightened. What did you tell him? That my son doesn't tell me his business, and neither should the sheriff. A flash of the steel that had allowed Martha to raise a son alone in a town that had never made it easy for her. Did he threaten you? Martha hesitated. Not in words, but he mentioned how there'd been drug activity reported near our block. Said they might need to conduct searches soon. The implied threat was clear. They were watching, and they would use Martha to get to him if necessary. Nathan led his mother inside, checking windows and doors as they went securing the perimeter, another habit from his military days. "I need to show you something," he said once they were seated at the kitchen table. He pulled out his phone and played one of the videos he'd recorded Bennett forcing cash from an elderly man outside the community center. Martha watched without surprise. "We all know what he does. We've always known. But now there's proof," Nathan said. "And not just of Bennett, of the whole system behind him." Martha studied her son's face. "What are you planning, Nathan?" "Nothing violent," he assured her. "But I can't walk away from this. Not anymore." Martha reached for his hand. "If you fight them with their weapons, with anger, with force, they'll win by turning you into what they fear most. A violent black man they can justify killing." The words hit Nathan like physical blows, because he had considered violence, had mapped out scenarios where Bennett simply disappeared, where problems were solved permanently. "Then how," he asked, frustration bleeding into his voice, "how do we fight a system this broken?" Martha's answer surprised him. "With silence." "Silence, that's what got us here." "No," Martha corrected. "Fear got us here. Silence can be powerful when it's chosen, not forced. When it's used to listen, to observe, to gather strength." She squeezed his hand. "Your father used to say that a man who speaks without thinking gives away his position. But a man who listens learns where the enemy hides." Nathan considered her words. "You're talking about patience." "I'm talking about strategy," Martha replied. "You were trained to complete missions, not just win fights. What would your training tell you to do now?" The answer came automatically. Gather intelligence, identify vulnerabilities, build networks, create leverage. "Then do that," Martha said simply. "But remember who you're fighting for, not just against." Nathan nodded slowly. "I need a base of operations, somewhere they won't look." Martha smiled. "I think I know just the place." The abandoned fishing cabin belonged to Thomas Gray's family, situated on the far side of Pinecrest Lake, where the wealthy rarely ventured. Its isolation made it perfect for Nathan's needs. By nightfall, he had transformed the small space into an operational center. Maps covered one wall, the town of Pinecrest divided into sectors marked with times and locations of Bennett's activities. Another wall held profiles, Bennett Sheriff Freeman, other officers known to participate in the corruption. Thomas arrived as Nathan was setting up surveillance equipment, small cameras and listening devices that would help build the evidence they needed. "This is really happening then," Thomas said, surveying the room. "It is," Nathan confirmed. "But I need more eyes, more ears." "You'll have them," Thomas promised. "There are people in this town who've been waiting for this moment. People who've been documenting abuses for years, just waiting for someone to listen." Nathan pinned another document to the wall, the military intelligence report that connected Bennett to his own past. "It's bigger than we thought. Bennett isn't just a corrupt cop. He's part of something systematic." Thomas examined the report. "You think they sent him here to your hometown on purpose?" "I think power protects itself," Nathan replied, "and makes examples of those who challenge it." The two men stood in silence, contemplating the scale of what they were undertaking. "What happens when you have all the evidence?" Thomas finally asked. "Who do you take it to when the sheriff is part of the problem?" It was the question Nathan had been asking himself since arriving in Pinecrest. The answer had come to him that morning as he'd watched Bennett intimidate a young black boy for the crime of riding his bicycle through the wrong neighborhood. "We don't take it anywhere," Nathan said. "We bring the evidence to them, all at once, in a way they can't ignore." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a plan." "It's getting there," Nathan admitted. "But first we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Every connection, every vulnerability." He pinned one final document to the wall, a county map showing property ownership changes over the last 5 years. The pattern was unmistakable. Pine Creek was being systematically emptied, its residents pushed out through intimidation, false arrests, and economic pressure. "This isn't just about Bennett's personal corruption," Nathan explained. "It's about land, development, money." Thomas whistled low. "They're clearing Pine Creek for development." "And using the police to do it," Nathan confirmed. "Bennett's their enforcer, the muscle behind the takeover." The scope of the corruption was breathtaking, spanning law enforcement, local government, and business interests. A conspiracy hiding in plain sight. How do we fight something this big? Thomas asked, overwhelmed. Nathan turned to face his old teacher, his expression set with quiet determination. The same way they built it, one piece at a time. The first test came sooner than expected. As Nathan drove back from the cabin, blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Not Bennett's car, but another Pinecrest police cruiser. Nathan pulled over, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. The officer who approached was young, probably new to the force. His hand rested nervously on his holster. License and registration. He demanded, flashlight beam aimed directly at Nathan's eyes. Nathan complied silently, movements slow and deliberate. Do you know why I pulled you over, Mr. Reed? The officer emphasized the name, making it clear this wasn't a random stop. No, sir, I don't, Nathan replied evenly. Taillights out. A lie. Nathan had checked all lights before leaving the cabin. And there's been reports of drug activity in this area. The pretext was so transparent it would have been laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. Mind if I search your vehicle? Not a request, a demand barely disguised as a question. I do mind, Nathan said calmly. Do you have probable cause, officer? He glanced at the nameplate. Officer Daniels. The question clearly caught Daniels off guard. He'd expected compliance or aggression, not calm resistance backed by knowledge of legal rights. I have reasonable suspicion, Daniels replied, less certain now. Based on, the area you're coming from is known for drug activity. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. I see. And have you documented this suspicion in your report? Because I'd be happy to wait while you call for a K-9 unit to establish proper probable cause. I believe the nearest one is in Charleston, so that would be about a 2-hour wait, during which time I'll be recording our interaction for my own protection. He held up his phone, which was indeed recording. Daniels hesitated, clearly receiving instructions through his earpiece. Someone was listening. Someone who now realized Nathan Reed wasn't going to be an easy target. You're free to go, Mr. Reed, Daniels finally said, handing back the license and registration. But Sheriff Freeman would like to meet with you. Says it's about your mother's complaints. A summons disguised as an invitation. Tell Sheriff Freeman I'll be happy to meet with him, Nathan replied. In a public place, with my lawyer present. The bluff worked. Daniels retreated to his cruiser, and Nathan was allowed to continue home. But the message had been delivered. They were watching, and they were worried. Good. Let them worry. Let them feel what the people of Pine Creek had felt for years, the constant awareness of being monitored, of power that could descend at any moment. As Nathan drove away, he knew Phase 1 was complete. Assessment, intelligence gathering, establishing the battlefield. Now came the more difficult part, building a case that couldn't be ignored or buried, finding allies, creating leverage. The real work was just beginning. And somewhere in Pinecrest, Officer Bennett was still on patrol, still exercising power without accountability, still unaware that his world was about to change. Nathan Reed, once called Shadow by his Special Forces team for his ability to move unseen, was back in his hometown. And this time, silence wasn't surrender. It was a weapon. To be continued in Part 2, The Weight of Silent Stories. The rented room above Mabel's diner had become Nathan's official residence in Pinecrest, a deliberate choice that placed him in plain sight while his real operations continued at the lake cabin. The space was small but functional, with a single bed, a desk by the window, and walls thin enough to hear conversations from the diner below. Perfect for a man who had learned the value of ambient intelligence. Nathan stood before a hand-drawn map of Pinecrest taped to the wall. Red pins marked locations where Bennett had been observed harassing residents. Blue pins indicated properties that had been seized and later sold to Pinecrest Development Corporation. Yellow pins represented potential allies, people who had filed complaints against Bennett or the department. The pattern was unmistakable now, a systematic clearing of Pine Creek block by block, disguised as routine policing. Nathan's phone vibrated with a text from Thomas. Freeman asking questions about you at the school. Careful. The warning wasn't surprising. 3 days of surveillance had confirmed that the sheriff's department was monitoring him. Plainclothes officers at the diner, Patrol cars driving past Martha's house with suspicious frequency expected counter-surveillance measures against a perceived threat. Let them watch. It would keep their attention focused on him rather than what was actually happening. Nathan turned to the stack of papers on his desk, handwritten accounts from Pine Creek residents detailing years of abuse, extortion, and intimidation. Thomas had been collecting them quietly, each person sharing their story in writing, since formal complaints had proven useless. Mrs. Johnson, 82, forced to surrender her late husband's war medals as evidence in a non-existent investigation. They were never returned. Marcus Taylor, 17, stopped 14 times in 2 months for matching the description of various suspects. No arrests, just repeated humiliation. Darius Wilson arrested on fabricated drug charges the day after refusing to sell his property to a developer. Charges dropped after his house was foreclosed. Nathan read each account, slowly absorbing not just the facts, but the emotion behind the careful handwriting. These weren't just complaints. They were buried truths finally being excavated. He picked up a marker and wrote on a blank sheet of paper, time 8:14 p.m. Tuesday, location Pine Creek Community Center, subject officer Bennett action demanded $70 from elderly male, Jackson T. witnesses. 3 evidence video file, Mountainhurst 17. The methodical documentation continued for each incident Nathan had personally witnessed or captured on video. Military precision applied to civilian injustice. Facts that couldn't be denied or dismissed as perception. His phone vibrated again, another text this time from Pastor Williams. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., church office. Nathan placed the phone down and stood at the window, watching the afternoon light cast long shadows across Main Street. Below, a patrol car drove by slowly, the officer inside, making no attempt to hide his surveillance. The walls of the small room seemed to close in, bringing with them memories of another confined space. The military detention cell where he'd spent 3 weeks after refusing the order in Syria. The isolation, the uncertainty, the knowledge that systems will protect themselves at any cost. But this time was different. This time he wasn't alone. Pastor Williams's office smelled of old books and coffee. The man himself sat behind his desk, hands folded in prayer-like contemplation, as Nathan entered. "You've been busy," the pastor said, gesturing for Nathan to sit. "I've been listening," Nathan corrected, "to stories that should have been heard years ago." Pastor Williams nodded. "And now you're thinking about how to make others listen." It wasn't a question. "I'm working on it." The pastor pushed a small Bible across the desk. "Open to Psalm 94. Nathan hesitated, then complied. Inside the Bible was a USB drive. "What's this deleted body cam footage?" Pastor Williams said quietly. "From a source inside the department who's grown a conscience. Or perhaps just grown tired of the rot." Nathan stared at the small device. "How did you get this?" "God works in mysterious ways," Pastor Williams replied with the hint of a smile. "And sometimes those ways include a janitor who needs extra money for his daughter's college tuition." Nathan pocketed the USB drive. "This could be dangerous for them. They know. But there comes a point when silence becomes complicity." The pastor leaned forward. "There's something else brewing, something I think you should be part of." "I'm listening. I'm organizing what I'm calling a day of silent sharing. Each person who's experienced abuse of power writes their story, no names, just the truth, and brings it to the church. We display them for the community to read, to witness." Nathan considered the proposal. "Bennett and Freeman will try to shut it down." "Let them try," Pastor Williams replied. "In a church before God and the community, let them show themselves." The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. No protests to be dispersed, no demonstrations to be labeled as disorderly. Just stories, witnesses, truth laid bare. When Nathan asked, "Sunday after next?" "We'll announce it this weekend." Nathan nodded slowly. "It could work, as part of something larger." "I thought you might say that." Pastor Williams handed him a card with a name and number. "Sophia Lewis, civil rights attorney in Charleston. She's been looking for a case like this for years." Nathan pocketed the card, another piece falling into place. "One more thing," Pastor Williams said as Nathan stood to leave. "Martha told me you've been watching Bennett's patrols, documenting his actions." "Yes. Be careful. When men like that feel cornered, they become most dangerous." The warning hung in the air between them, acknowledged with a silent nod. Outside the church, Nathan paused on the steps, allowing his eyes to adjust to the bright sunlight. Across the street, a patrol car sat parked beneath a tree, the officer inside making no attempt to hide his surveillance. Nathan stared directly at the officer, then slowly raised his hand in a casual wave. Not a gesture of defiance, but of acknowledgement. I see you watching me, and I want you to see me seeing you. The patrol car started its engine and pulled away. Danina, the footage on the USB drive exceeded Nathan's expectations. 27 video files, each labeled with dates and officer badge numbers. The quality was poor compressed files salvaged from a database marked for deletion, but the content was unmistakable. Bennett forcing a teenage boy to empty his pockets, then pocketing cash himself before releasing the youth. Bennett and two other officers entering a home without a warrant, laughing about probable cause that could be invented after the fact. Bennett shoving an elderly man against a wall during a routine interview. Most damning of all, Sheriff Freeman in his office reviewing a complaint form about Bennett, then marking it unsubstantiated without investigation before saying to another officer, "The East Side Project needs another year. Tell Bennett to ease up a little, just enough to keep the wolves at bay." Nathan downloaded the files to an encrypted hard drive, then carefully wiped the USB drive clean. The evidence was mounting, but so were the risks. His phone rang an unknown number. "Reed," he answered cautiously. "Nathan Reed." A woman's voice, professional and direct. "This is Sophia Lewis. Pastor Williams suggested I call." The civil rights attorney Pastor Williams had mentioned. "Yes, I was going to contact you. I understand you're gathering evidence about a situation in Pinecrest." Nathan chose his words carefully. "I'm looking into some concerns about local law enforcement practices." Pastor Williams was more specific, Sophia replied. He mentioned systemic harassment, possible civil rights violations, and a property development scheme that might involve corrupt officials. "You shouldn't discuss this on an unsecured line," Nathan warned. "My thoughts exactly. I'll be in Pinecrest tomorrow. Coffee at Westside Cafe, 10 a.m. It's outside Sheriff Freeman's jurisdiction." The call ended before Nathan could respond. He returned to the videos, watching each one multiple times, noting times, dates, and participants. The tactical part of his brain, the part trained for mission planning, was already forming connections, identifying leverage points, mapping a strategy. But another part, the part that had seen too much violence, too much abuse of power, felt a rising tide of anger that threatened his careful control. Nathan closed the laptop and moved to the window, focusing on his breathing. Slow inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. The meditation technique he'd learned after his discharge. The disciplined calm returned gradually. Anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not when so much depended on precision, on control, on silence strategically broken. The Westside Cafe sat just beyond the Pinecrest town line in the neighboring community of Harper's Mill. Modern and bustling compared to Pinecrest's fading storefronts, it attracted a different clientele, professionals from the nearby Office Park College, students from the community college. Nathan arrived 20 minutes early, securing a table with clear sight lines to both entrances and minimal exposure from windows. Old habits. Sophia Lewis arrived precisely on time. She wore a tailored gray suit and carried a leather portfolio case that spoke of competence and seriousness. Early 40s with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to courtrooms and confrontation. "Mr. Reed," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Nathan shook her hand, noting the firm grip. "Ms. Lewis." They ordered coffee, waiting until the server departed before speaking of substantial matters. "Pastor Williams speaks highly of you," Sophia began. "Says you have military training that's proving useful in your current project." "I was Special Forces," Nathan confirmed. "It teaches you to see patterns, to understand systems." "And what patterns are you seeing in Pinecrest?" Nathan studied her for a moment, assessing. "Why are you interested in a small-town police department?" Sophia's smile was brief but genuine. "Direct. I appreciate that." She opened her portfolio and slid a document across the table. "I've been tracking civil rights complaints across the state for the past 5 years. Notice anything?" The document was a map of South Carolina with various counties highlighted in different colors based on complaint rates. Pinecrest County was deep red, the highest category. Yet despite the high rate of complaints, Sophia continued, there have been 0 successful cases against the department, 0 federal investigations, 0 consequences. That's about to change, Nathan said quietly. Is it? Sophia leaned forward. Because I've seen communities try and fail to hold corrupt departments accountable. Evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. Systems protect themselves. Not this time. What makes you so sure? Nathan considered his response carefully. Because I'm not trying to win a single battle. I'm dismantling their entire structure. Sophia studied him, reassessing. Pastor Williams didn't exaggerate about you. She pulled out a small recorder. May I? Everything you say will be protected under attorney-client privilege. Nathan nodded and Sophia activated the device. Tell me everything. From the beginning. For the next hour, Nathan laid out what he discovered, the systematic harassment of Pine Creek residents, the property seizures, the connection to development interests, Bennett's military background, Sheriff Freeman's complicity, and the evidence he'd gathered thus far. Sophia listened without interruption, taking occasional notes but mostly absorbing, analyzing. The body cam footage is particularly valuable, she said when he finished, but we'll need more. Testimony, documentation of the property transfers, evidence that directly connects the harassment to the development plans. I'm working on it, Nathan assured her. You realize what you're up against. This isn't just a corrupt cop. This is an entrenched system with political and financial backing. I'm aware. Sophia deactivated the recorder and sat back. Pastor Williams mentioned you were discharged from the military after refusing an order. Mind telling me about that? The question caught Nathan off guard. It's not relevant to the case. It's relevant to your credibility if you ever need to testify, Sophia countered, and to my understanding of who I'm working with. Nathan's jaw tightened. Some memories remained too raw to share casually. Sophia seemed to sense his reluctance. Let me be clear, Mr. Reed. I believe in what you're doing. I want to help, but I need to know if there's anything in your past that could be used to discredit you or this case. The logic was sound, even if the request was uncomfortable. I was in Syria, Nathan began, voice low. Our unit received intelligence about a village allegedly housing terrorist cells. I was the spotter for our sniper team. The order came to fire on a gathering outside what they claimed was a weapons cache. He paused, the memory still vivid. It was a family celebration. Children playing, women preparing food. I refused the order to fire. And for that, they discharged you. For that, they made an example of me, Nathan corrected. The military doesn't tolerate questioning of orders, even when those orders violate every rule of engagement we're taught. Sophia nodded slowly. They'll try to use that against you. Paint you as disloyal, unstable, with a grudge against authority. Let them try, Nathan replied. The truth is the truth. Truth needs protection, Mr. Reed. Careful handling. Sophia closed her portfolio. I want to help you build this case, but we need to do it right, methodically, with irrefutable evidence and credible witnesses. That's what I've been gathering. Good. Continue that work. Document everything. I'll start preparing the legal framework for a civil rights case. She handed him a business card with her personal number, handwritten on the back. Call me anytime. And Nathan, be careful. Men like Bennett, when cornered, are at their most dangerous. It was the second such warning in 2 days. Nathan took it seriously. As they parted outside the cafe, Sophia added one final thought. This isn't just about justice for Pine Creek. If we can prove systemic corruption here, it could open doors for similar cases across the state. You're building something bigger than you know. The weight of that responsibility settled on Nathan's shoulders as he drove back toward Pinecrest. He had come home seeking justice for his mother, for his community. Now the scope had expanded, ripples potentially affecting communities beyond his own. His phone vibrated with a text from Thomas. Incident at high school. Bennett, come now. The scene at Pinecrest High School unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. A black teenager no more than 16 stood beside his car, in the school parking lot, tears streaming down his face as he spoke frantically into his phone. Mom, he's saying the car is stolen. Mom, please come. I'm scared. Bennett loomed over the boy, hand resting casually on his holster, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Registration doesn't match your name, son. That's probable cause. Nathan parked across the street observing. His hand gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened, every instinct screaming to intervene. But intervention now would jeopardize the larger mission. Evidence. Documentation. Building the case. He raised his phone, recording the encounter from a distance. Thomas emerged from the school building, moving quickly toward Bennett and the student. Officer Bennett, Thomas called, voice carrying across the parking lot. That's Jamal Washington. The car belongs to his mother. He has permission to drive it. Bennett turned, irritation flashing across his face. Stay out of this gray police business. I'm the boy's teacher, Thomas replied, positioning himself subtly between Bennett and Jamal. And I'm a witness that he drives this car to school every day with his mother's permission. Registration doesn't match, Bennett repeated. I need to verify ownership. His mother is on her way, Thomas said calmly. Perhaps we can wait for her to arrive and clear this up. Other teachers had begun to gather at the school entrance, watching the confrontation. Students pulled out phones, recording. Witnesses, eyes, the very thing Bennett typically avoided. Nathan continued filming, documenting Bennett's body language, the threatening hand on the holster, the intimidation tactics. The standoff lasted 10 more minutes until Jamal's mother arrived, registration papers in hand, fury in her eyes. This is my car, she stated, voice steady despite her obvious anger. My son has permission to drive it. These papers prove it's mine. Bennett reviewed the documents with deliberate slowness before handing them back. Just doing my job, ma'am, making sure everything's in order. Your job, she repeated, the words weighted with years of similar encounters. Is harassing my son your job, Officer Bennett? Bennett's smile never reached his eyes. Just keeping our community safe, ma'am. You should be thanking me. He returned to his patrol car without another word, but not before shooting a glance in Nathan's direction, a clear acknowledgement that he'd been seen recording the encounter. As Bennett drove away, Nathan approached Thomas and the Washingtons. Mrs. Washington, Thomas said, this is Nathan Reed. He's documenting incidents like this one. The woman studied Nathan with cautious hope. Documenting for what purpose? For justice, Nathan replied simply. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about what happened here today and other encounters with Officer Bennett if there have been any? Mrs. Washington's laugh held no humor. Other encounters. My son has been stopped 8 times this year for driving while black in Pinecrest. I'd like to hear about all of them, Nathan said. Every detail you can remember. She looked at her son, still shaken from the encounter, then back to Nathan. You really think anything will change? Yes, Nathan answered with quiet certainty. I do. It wasn't just optimism. It was conviction born of mounting evidence and growing allies. The pieces were coming together, each incident, each testimony, each video adding to the weight that would eventually break the system. Later, as Nathan added the new video to his collection, he replayed the moment when Bennett had looked directly at him. The recognition, the challenge. The game had changed. Bennett now knew he was being watched, documented. The question was how he would respond, retreat or escalation. Nathan suspected the latter. Men like Bennett didn't back down. They doubled down, which meant the most dangerous phase was just beginning. 5 days later, Nathan sat in Pastor Williams' office alongside Thomas Sophia Lewis and 3 community elders from Pine Creek. The day of silent sharing was set for Sunday, just 2 days away. Preparations had been made in careful secrecy, though rumors had inevitably begun to circulate. We've collected over 70 written testimonies, Pastor Williams reported, each one detailing specific incidents of harassment, intimidation, or worse. Any from current or former officers? Sophia asked. 1, Thomas confirmed. Anonymous, but with enough specific details to establish credibility, describes a directive from Sheriff Freeman to focus enforcement on properties marked for potential development. Nathan unfolded a map of Pine Creek, now marked with additional indicators. These red circles show properties targeted repeatedly by Bennett or other officers. These blue marks show properties later acquired by Pinecrest Development Corporation. The pattern is unmistakable. Sophia examined the map. This strengthens the RICO angle. If we can prove the harassment was deliberately aimed at devaluing property for later acquisition, that's a federal case. We're still missing the direct link, Nathan noted. Something that explicitly connects Freeman to the development company. Maybe not, Thomas interjected, sliding a folder across the table. County records. Freeman's brother-in-law is listed as a silent partner in Pinecrest Development. And here's the interesting part. Their first major investor came on board 2 weeks after Freeman was elected sheriff. Sophia's eyes widened slightly as she reviewed the documents. This is good. Very good. There's more, Pastor Williams added. The USB drive with deleted body cam footage. Our source says there are other files conversations between Freeman and county officials about the development plans, but they're stored on a separate server harder to access. Nathan absorbed this information, mind already calculating approach's vulnerabilities. I might be able to help with that. Sophia shot him a warning look. Nothing illegal. We can't compromise the case. Nothing illegal, Nathan assured her. Just creative application of skills I already possess. The meeting continued, details refined, contingencies planned. The day of silent sharing would be just the first public step away to bring the community's experiences into the open to create a foundation for what would follow. As they finished, Mrs. Jenkins, the church secretary, knocked urgently on the door. Pastor, you need to see this. She handed him a tablet with a local news site displayed. The headline froze everyone in the room. Sheriff's Department announces major drug investigation in Pine Creek. The article detailed plans for a comprehensive operation to address growing narcotics concerns in the Pine Creek neighborhood, scheduled to begin Monday morning, the day after the church event. It's not coincidence, Thomas said quietly. They know something's happening. They're trying to intimidate people into staying home Sunday. Pastor Williams agreed. Nathan studied the article, noting the specific language. This isn't just intimidation. It's preparation for a counter-narrative. If our event gains traction, they'll claim it was organized to obstruct a legitimate drug investigation. Sophia closed her portfolio with a sharp snap. Then we accelerate. I'll file preliminary papers, tomorrow's civil rights violations, pattern of harassment, RICO implications. It won't stop their operation, but it puts them on notice that they're being watched at the federal level. And I'll contact media outlets in Charleston, Thomas added. Get cameras here for Sunday. Nathan remained silent, mind working through scenarios, counter moves, vulnerabilities. Bennett and Freeman were reacting exactly as predicted, escalating rather than retreating. The danger was increasing, but so was the opportunity. We need to warn the community, Pastor Williams said. Make sure everyone understands what's happening. No, Nathan finally spoke. That's what they want: fear, retreat, silence. Instead, we show them exactly what they don't expect. He looked around the room at these unlikely allies who had become central to his mission. We show them that we're not afraid anymore. The church basement had been transformed for the event, walls covered with large blank sheets of paper, tables arranged with pens and cards for writing testimonies, a simple display explaining the purpose: share your story, break the silence. Nathan arrived early Sunday morning, performing a security sweep out of habit, checking entrances, exit routes, potential vulnerabilities. The church would be full for regular service at 11 a.m. The day of silent sharing would begin immediately after, running through the afternoon. Thomas joined him as he finished his inspection. Everything's secure. As much as possible, Nathan replied. Any word from our contacts at the sheriff's department? Nothing specific, but there's nervous energy there. Officers being called in, schedules adjusted. Something's brewing. Nathan nodded. They'll make a move today. Try to disrupt or discredit what we're doing. How can you be sure? Because it's what I would do in their position, Nathan answered simply. Cut off the threat before it gains momentum. The church began filling for regular service. Nathan took a seat in the back row, observing. Martha sat near the front, surrounded by friends and neighbors. She hadn't wanted him to come home for this fight, but now that it had begun, she was fully committed, organizing, coordinating, rallying support among the elder women who were the backbone of Pine Creek. Pastor Williams delivered a sermon that never explicitly mentioned their plan, yet laid the spiritual foundation for it, speaking of truth as a liberating force of silence, broken as chains shattered, of community as strength against oppression. As the service concluded, Pastor Williams made the announcement everyone had been waiting for. Today we begin a journey toward healing through truth. In our basement, you'll find space to share your experiences. Times when power was misused, when dignity was violated, when silence was forced rather than chosen. No names are required, only truth. He paused, looking directly at the congregation. Some may say this effort is divisive, that it reopens wounds better left closed, that it threatens the peace of our community. To them I say this: there is no peace without justice. There is no healing without truth. And there is no community where some must live in fear while others live in comfort. The response was immediate, a standing ovation that shook the rafters of the old church, voices raised in affirmation, in relief, in hope. As people began moving toward the basement, Nathan noticed movement at the church entrance. Two uniformed officers not entering but observing. Surveillance. Assessment. The first move in whatever counter-strategy Freeman had planned. Nathan made his way to the basement, where the sharing had already begun. People wrote their stories on cards, then posted them on the wall, creating a visual record of experiences long kept hidden. Some wrote briefly, clinically. Others filled card after card, years of suppressed truth finally flowing. A teenage girl stood before one section of wall, tears streaming silently as she wrote about being followed home repeatedly by a patrol car. The officer commenting on her appearance, suggesting she could avoid tickets if she was friendly. An elderly man, hands shaking with age and emotion, described how his heart medication had been confiscated during a search and never returned, forcing him to choose between purchasing replacement medication and paying his electric bill. A young mother detailed how Bennett had threatened to call child services after she questioned why he was searching her car during a routine traffic stop. Story after story, card after card, the wall became a testament to years of systematic abuse. A community's pain made visible. Nathan moved among them, observing occasionally, helping an elderly resident write their story when arthritis made the task difficult. His presence was noted, a silent guardian ensuring the space remained safe for truth-telling. Mid-afternoon, a commotion at the church entrance drew Nathan's attention. He moved quickly upstairs to find Sheriff Freeman himself standing in the church foyer, flanked by 4 deputies. Bennett was not among them. Pastor Williams. Freeman called, voice carrying into the sanctuary where the pastor was speaking with church members. I need a word. Pastor Williams approached, calmly, dignity in every step. Sheriff Freeman, how can I help you today? I understand you're hosting some kind of complaint session about my department. Freeman said, the false pleasantness in his tone barely masking his anger. We're providing a space for community members to share their experiences, Pastor Williams corrected, many of which, yes, involve interactions with law enforcement. Freeman's smile tightened. I should remind you that making false accusations against police officers is a serious matter, potentially criminal. No accusations are being made, Sheriff Hoy, Pastor Williams replied. Just stories being shared, personal experiences being documented. Documentation implies purpose, Freeman countered. Are you building some kind of case, Pastor? I'm a spiritual leader, not a lawyer, Pastor Williams said simply. My concern is healing, not litigation. The confrontation had drawn attention. Church members gathered in the sanctuary, watching silently. Among them, Nathan noticed, were several people with phones raised, recording the encounter. Freeman seemed to realize it too, his gaze sweeping the growing audience. I came here as a courtesy pastor to inform you that tomorrow morning my department will be conducting a major operation in Pine Creek. For the safety of residents, I suggest you advise your congregation to cooperate fully. We always cooperate with lawful police activity, Sheriff, Pastor Williams assured him, just as we expect law enforcement to respect the constitutional rights of our community members. The implicit challenge hung in the air between them. Freeman took a step closer, lowering his voice. You're making a mistake stirring this up. Some things are better left alone. Like justice, Pastor Williams asked quietly. Like truth. Freeman's jaw tightened. He turned to leave but found his path blocked by an unexpected presence, Nathan Reed, standing silently in the doorway. The two men locked eyes, power facing challenge, system facing change. Mr. Reed, Freeman acknowledged, voice cold. I understand you've been quite busy since returning to Pinecrest. Just reconnecting with the community sheriff, Nathan replied evenly. Interesting way to reconnect collecting complaints following my officers building some kind of, what conspiracy theory? No theory. Nathan said simply, just observation. Freeman studied him, calculating threat levels, potential responses. Your military record suggests a problem with authority read, a tendency to question orders, to undermine systems. My record shows I follow my conscience, Nathan corrected. Something every officer should do. The veiled accusation wasn't lost on Freeman. His expression hardened. Be careful, Reed. Pinecrest isn't the sandbox. Different rules apply here. Actually, Nathan replied, the same rules should apply everywhere. Constitution, law, human dignity. Or does Pinecrest operate under different standards? It was a direct challenge delivered without heat, but with unmistakable intent. Freeman recognized it for what it was, not just resistance, but the opening move in a calculated confrontation. We'll be watching you, Freeman said finally, the pretense of civility abandoned. Likewise, Nathan responded. Freeman pushed past deputies following in tight formation. Outside, a line of patrol cars waited, a show of force meant to intimidate. Pastor Williams approached Nathan as the church members returned to the basement, buzzing with excitement and apprehension. That was bold, the pastor observed. Perhaps too bold. It was necessary, Nathan replied. He needed to understand that intimidation won't work anymore. And Bennett, where was he? Nathan frowned. That's what concerns me. Bennett wouldn't miss an opportunity like this unless he had another assignment. Something more important. The answer came moments later in the form of a frantic phone call from Martha to Pastor Williams. The pastor's face darkened as he listened. Bennett is at your mother's house, he told Nathan, covering the phone. Says he has a warrant to search for narcotics. Nathan was moving before Pastor Williams finished speaking, every muscle tense with controlled fury. This was the counter move targeting Martha to get to him, using her as leverage. Nathan, Pastor Williams called after him. Remember what Martha told you. Don't let them turn you into what they fear. The words followed Nathan as he sprinted to his car. The tactical part of his brain was already calculating response options, threat assessments, potential outcomes. But beneath that cool analysis, a deeper, more primal emotion burned, the fury of a son whose mother was being targeted because of his actions. Bennett had chosen his counter-move carefully. Now Nathan would have to choose his. To be continued in Part 3, When Silence Becomes a Weapon. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Nathan's car skidded to a stop in front of Martha's house. 2 patrol cars were parked in the driveway, their presence a deliberate show of force in the quiet neighborhood. Neighbors stood on porches and behind curtains, watching, their silence born not of indifference but of helpless dread. Nathan approached with measured steps, controlling the fury that threatened to overtake his tactical thinking. Every fiber of his being wanted to rush in to confront, to protect. But 8 years of Special Forces training had taught him that emotion-driven reactions rarely succeeded against calculated provocations. This was a trap. Bennett was counting on him to react exactly as expected, with anger, with threats, perhaps even with violence. To become the stereotype that would justify whatever came next. If you fight them with their weapons, with anger, with force, they'll win by turning you into what they fear most. Satimar. Martha's words echoed in his mind, a compass pointing toward restraint. Officer Daniels stood guard at the front door, hand resting on his holster as Nathan approached. Reed? Daniels acknowledged tension evident in his stance. This is an active police operation. You need to step back. That's my mother's house, Nathan replied, voice deliberately calm. I'd like to see the warrant. Bennett has it inside. Nathan nodded once. Then I'd like to enter, to ensure my mother is safe during this operation. Daniels hesitated, clearly operating without specific instructions for this scenario. Wait here. He disappeared inside, returning moments later with a slight nod. You can enter, but any interference with police activities. I understand the law, Officer Daniels. Nathan interrupted quietly. Better than some who enforce it. The interior of Martha's house had been transformed by Bennett's search cushions removed from furniture drawers, pulled open, contents spilled onto floors. The methodical destruction disguised as official procedure. Martha sat at the kitchen table, back straight, face composed, despite the violation occurring around her. Bennett stood nearby, directing two other officers as they examined cabinets and appliances. "Nathan," Martha said, voice steady, "Officer Bennett says they've received an anonymous tip about drugs in our home." Bennett turned, a smile spreading across his face that never reached his eyes. "Reed, perfect timing. Maybe you can help us locate these narcotics. Save your mother the inconvenience of a more thorough search." The implication was clear. This could get worse. Much worse. Nathan remained in the doorway, one hand visible, the other in his pocket, where his phone was already recording. "I'd like to see the warrant, Officer Bennett." Bennett produced a document with theatrical flourish. "Signed by Judge Morris this morning. Very comprehensive." Nathan examined it carefully. The warrant existed, but its foundation, an anonymous tip about drug activity, was transparently fabricated. Yet legally, it gave Bennett authority to continue his destructive search. "You won't find anything," Nathan said calmly, "because there's nothing to find." "We'll see," Bennett replied, clearly enjoying the moment. Anonymous tips are often surprisingly accurate, especially when someone has recently returned home after a problematic military discharge. The threat was barely veiled. Bennett was prepared to plant evidence if necessary. Nathan met his gaze steadily. "Every officer present is now being recorded, as is this entire illegal harassment disguised as a search. Any evidence discovered will be contested as planted." Bennett's smile faltered slightly. "Phones can be confiscated as evidence, Reed. This recording is being live-streamed to my attorney." Nathan lied smoothly. "Sophia Lewis. She specializes in civil rights violations by law enforcement." It wasn't true the recording was simply being saved to his phone, but the mention of Sophia's name had the desired effect. Bennett's confidence wavered, uncertainty creeping into his expression. "Continue the search." Bennett ordered his officers, but his voice lacked its previous assurance. Nathan moved to sit beside Martha, placing a protective hand over hers. "I'm here, Mom. Everything's going to be fine." Martha squeezed his hand in return, a silent exchange of strength. For the next 45 minutes, they sat in dignified silence as Bennett's officers tore through the house, growing increasingly frustrated as no contraband materialized. Bennett himself grew more agitated, barking orders, demanding more intensive searching. Finally, he stood before them, anger barely contained. "We're done for now, but this investigation remains open." "Of course it does," Nathan replied evenly, "because that's more convenient than admitting it was baseless from the start." Bennett leaned down, voice lowered to a threatening whisper. "This isn't over, Reed. Not by a long shot. Whatever you think you're building, whatever case, whatever movement, I can tear it down faster than you can imagine." Nathan didn't respond, maintaining the steady gaze that had unnerved enemies in combat zones across the world. Not angry, not afraid, simply present and immovable. Bennett straightened, disconcerted by the lack of reaction. "Let's go," he ordered his officers. As they filed out, Nathan followed to the doorway, watching as they retreated to their vehicles. Only when they had driven away did he return to Martha, who had already begun restoring order to her violated home. "You knew this would happen," she said, not an accusation, but an observation. "I anticipated something," Nathan admitted, helping her replace cushions on the sofa. "But I didn't expect them to target you so directly so soon." Martha straightened a picture frame Bennett had deliberately knocked askew. "They're scared." "They should be," Nathan replied. "No," Martha corrected gently. "I don't mean of consequences or exposure. I mean of you, of what you represent." Nathan paused in his cleaning. "And what's that? Someone who can't be intimidated, who knows their tactics from the inside." She touched his cheek in a gesture of maternal pride mixed with concern. "Someone who doesn't respond the way they've trained themselves to expect black men to respond, with either submission or anger they can then punish." The observation was astute. Bennett had been seeking a specific reaction, one that would justify escalation, that would undermine Nathan's credibility, that would reinforce the narrative police relied upon to maintain control. "Your silence frightens them more than any shouting ever could," Martha continued. "It's a language they don't speak, a weapon they don't know how to counter." Nathan nodded slowly, understanding crystallizing. The strategy he'd been intuitively pursuing now took clearer shape. Not just gathering evidence, not just building a case, but demonstrating through his very presence and responses that the old patterns of intimidation no longer worked. His phone vibrated with a text from Thomas. Church event concluded, over 200 testimonies collected, media coverage secured for tomorrow, sheriff planning major operation in Pine Creek at dawn. The pieces were moving faster now, the confrontation accelerating. Bennett's failed search was just the opening salvo of what would likely be an increasingly desperate counteroffensive. Mom, Nathan said gently, I think you should stay with Pastor Williams tonight, just as a precaution. Martha studied her son's face. And what will you be doing? Finishing what we started, he replied, making sure all the evidence is secure before tomorrow. Martha nodded, understanding more than he'd explicitly stated. Be careful, and remember. I know, Nathan interrupted with a small smile. Don't let them turn me into what they fear most. No, Martha corrected. I was going to say, remember that you've already won. They just don't know it yet. The lake cabin had become command central for what Nathan now thought of as Operation Truth. Thomas was already there when Nathan arrived, organizing the testimonies collected from the church event into categories: physical harassment, illegal searches, extortion, intimidation. It's more than we hoped for, Thomas reported, gesturing to the stacks of testimony cards. People who've been silent for years finally spoke up. Nathan examined the collection. These need to be digitized, secured off-site, tonight. Already in progress, Sophia has a team of paralegals scanning everything, creating backup copies. Nathan nodded approval, then turned to the wall map of Pinecrest. Sheriff's planning something big for tomorrow morning. We need to be prepared. Mass arrest probably, Thomas suggested. A show of force to intimidate people back into silence. Based on fabricated drug allegations, Nathan agreed. Classic counterinsurgency tactic: discredit the opposition by associating them with criminality. Thomas raised an eyebrow at the military terminology. Is that how you see this as insurgency? In a way, Nathan admitted, we're challenging an entrenched power structure that will use every tool at its disposal to maintain control. The principles aren't that different from what I saw overseas. His phone vibrated with a call from Sophia Lewis. Bennett just raided your mother's house, he reported without preamble. I know, I was there, Sophia replied. What you may not know is that Freeman has requested support from neighboring counties for tomorrow's operation. They're bringing in tactical units, K-9 teams, the works. The escalation was significant but not surprising. They're overreaching, Nathan observed, creating a spectacle that will attract more attention, not less. Exactly, Sophia confirmed. I've already alerted media contacts in Charleston and Columbia, and I've filed emergency motions with the federal court requesting oversight of any mass arrest operation. Will that stop them? No, she admitted, but it creates a record and ensures federal eyes on whatever happens. Nathan considered the next steps. We need to accelerate, tonight. What are you thinking? Sophia asked, caution in her voice. The body cam server, the one with conversations between Freeman and county officials about the development plans. We need that evidence before they can destroy it. Silence stretched across the line. Nathan, we can't. Not illegally, he assured her, but our source inside the department, the one who provided the first USB drive. They might be willing to help again, especially now that momentum is building, Sophia sighed. I can't be part of that conversation. Understood, but you can be ready to receive whatever evidence emerges, legally. After ending the call, Nathan turned to Thomas. I need Pastor Williams' contact at the sheriff's department, the janitor. Thomas hesitated. Nathan, that puts them at serious risk. They're already at risk, Nathan countered. Freeman will be looking for leaks, especially after tomorrow. This might be our last chance to get the most damning evidence. Thomas finally nodded, sending a text message. Minutes later, Nathan had a name, Carlos Mendez, and a phone number. The call was brief, coded, and conclusive. Carlos was willing to help one last time, but it had to be tonight. Security protocols were changing tomorrow in preparation for the operation. I'll meet him at midnight, Nathan informed Thomas. In the meantime, we need to prepare the community for what's coming. How Nathan moved to the cabin's small desk, pulling out a notebook. by giving them a script, not for resistance that would play into Freeman's hands, but for silent dignity, for witnessing. He began writing instructions, simple, clear guidelines for how to respond when officers appeared at doors tomorrow morning. Record everything. Comply with lawful orders, but verbally question unlawful ones. Maintain calm dignity. Request names and badge numbers. Ask to see warrants. Remain silent when questioned without an attorney. A protocol for collective peaceful resistance that would document abuses without providing pretext for escalation. Get these to Pastor Williams, Nathan instructed, handing the completed notes to Thomas. He can distribute them through the church network tonight. Thomas reviewed the instructions, nodding slowly. This is good. Really good. It's just the beginning, Nathan replied. Tomorrow everything changes. The sheriff's department parking lot was empty except for a few patrol cars and a single maintenance truck. Carlos Mendez making his usual late-night cleaning rounds. The building's security cameras had a 3-minute loop of technical difficulties scheduled for 12:15 a.m., providing a brief window for the exchange. Nathan approached from the shadows behind the building, moving with the silent efficiency that had earned him his Special Forces nickname. Carlos waited by the dumpsters, nervousness evident in his posture. You're taking a big risk, Nathan acknowledged as they met. Carlos nodded grimly. My daughter deserves to live in a better Pinecrest than I did, one where police protect, not prey on people who look like us. He handed over a small flash drive. Everything I could find, conversations between Freeman and developers, planning meetings about clearing Pine Creek, even discussions about you. They've been investigating your military discharge, looking for leverage. Nathan pocketed the drive. This helps more than you know. There's something else, Carlos added, voice lowered further. Tomorrow's operation. It's not just about arrests. They're planning to hit specific houses, hardest community leaders, people who were at the church event today. They have a list. Is my mother's house on it? Carlos nodded. And Pastor Williams, Thomas Gray, anyone they think is helping you. The information was troubling, but strategically valuable. It confirmed that Freeman was panicking, overreaching in ways that would ultimately expose rather than protect the department's corruption. You should leave town tomorrow, Nathan advised, just for a day or two. Already planned, Carlos confirmed. My sister lives in Charleston. They parted ways quickly, Carlos returning to his maintenance duties, Nathan disappearing into the shadows as silently as he'd arrived. The flash drive burned in his pocket like a live coal, not just evidence, but the potential catalyst for real change. He needed to get it to Sophia immediately before anything could happen to it. As he approached his car parked 3 blocks from the sheriff's department, Nathan sensed rather than saw the presence waiting for him. Military instinct honed by years in hostile territory alerted him to the surveillance. He changed direction casually, taking an alternative route that would reveal if he was being followed. The footsteps behind him confirmed his suspicion. Someone tracking him, maintaining distance but definitely pursuing? Nathan led his follower away from his vehicle into the empty park that sat at the center of Pinecrest. There among the shadows of oak trees and playground equipment, he suddenly stopped and turned. Officer Bennett, he said quietly, following me seems outside your official duties. Bennett emerged from the darkness alone and in plain clothes rather than uniform. His hand rested near his waistband where Nathan assumed an off-duty weapon was concealed. Read, Bennett acknowledged. Late night for a concerned citizen. I could say the same for a public servant. Bennett circled slowly, maintaining distance while studying Nathan with predatory focus. I know what you're doing, building some kind of case, turning the community against the department, against me. The community turned against you long ago, Nathan replied calmly. They just didn't have a voice to say so. And now you're their voice, their savior. Bennett's laugh held no humor. You don't even know what you've stumbled into. I know enough, Nathan countered, about the development plans, about Freeman's connections, about your military record that should have disqualified you from law enforcement. That last point hit a nerve. Bennett's expression hardened. You think your honorable stance in Syria makes you better? They told us you refused to fire on terrorists. They told you what served their narrative, Nathan replied, just like they buried what really happened with that boy in Iraq. Bennett's hand twitched toward his concealed weapon. You don't know anything about Iraq. I know enough to understand why Freeman protected you, why the system needs men like you, men who follow orders without questioning, who enforce without empathy." The words landed like physical blows. Bennett's breathing quickened his control, visibly slipping. "Why are you so quiet?" he demanded suddenly. "In every encounter, every confrontation, you just watch, silent. Why don't you fight back?" The question revealed more about Bennett than he perhaps intended, a man who understood conflict only in terms of dominance and submission, of violence and counterviolence. Nathan's silence confused him, disrupted his understanding of power dynamics. "Because silence is more honest than shouting," Nathan replied simply, "and more powerful than violence." Bennett drew his weapon in a single fluid motion, aiming directly at Nathan's chest. "Is silence more powerful than this?" Nathan remained perfectly still, showing neither fear nor aggression. "Are you going to shoot an unarmed man in a public park, officer?" Bennett add, "Another crime to the record we're building against you." Bennett's hand trembled slightly. "You think you're untouchable, that your case will change anything? The system protects its own." "Until it doesn't," Nathan replied. "Until the cost of protection exceeds the benefit. You're becoming a liability, Bennett. To Freeman. To everyone connected to this development scheme. How long before they decide you're not worth the risk?" Doubt flickered across Bennett's face, a warrior suddenly uncertain of his commander's loyalty. The weapon remained pointed at Nathan, but the conviction behind it wavered. "What do you want?" Bennett finally asked. "Money, a deal." "What makes this go away?" "Justice," Nathan answered simply. "Accountability. Change." Bennett's laugh was bitter. "Fucking idealist. Those things don't exist in the real world." "They do when enough people demand them," Nathan countered. "When silence becomes too loud to ignore." Bennett's finger tightened on the trigger, not pulling yet, but threatening. "Why don't you say anything? Why don't you shout or beg or run?" Frustration twisted his features. "What makes you so different?" "I've seen what real courage looks like," Nathan replied quietly. "It's not a gun pointed at an unarmed man." Something in Bennett seemed to break at those words. Not surrender, but a fracturing of certainty. The weapon lowered slightly as confusion replaced anger. "I've never met anyone like you," Bennett admitted, voice barely audible. "Your silence, it's driving me crazy." In that moment of vulnerability, Nathan could have attacked, could have disarmed Bennett, subdued him, even injured him. His training had prepared him for exactly such opportunities. But violence would only reinforce the narrative Bennett lived within. Instead, Nathan maintained his stillness, his silence. Bennett raised the gun again, resolve returning. "This doesn't end here. Tomorrow we're cleaning house in Pine Creek. Anyone connected to your little movement gets special attention." "I know," Nathan replied, "and every moment will be documented, every abuse recorded, every violation added to the federal case Sophia Lewis is building." The mention of formal legal proceedings visibly unsettled Bennett. He backed away slowly, weapon still raised. "Stay away from the operation tomorrow, for your own safety." "I'll be exactly where I need to be," Nathan assured him. "Watching, witnessing, making sure justice eventually finds its way to Pinecrest." Bennett disappeared into the darkness, leaving Nathan alone in the park. Only then did he allow himself a deep breath, acknowledging the danger that had just passed. Bennett was unraveling, becoming more unpredictable, more dangerous. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation to its peak. His phone vibrated with a text from Sophia. "Where are you? I have news." Sophia's hotel room had become a makeshift legal office with documents spread across every surface and 3 laptops running simultaneously. She looked up as Nathan entered, relief evident on her face. "I was worried," she admitted. "There's unusual police activity tonight." "I know," Nathan replied, handing her the flash drive. "Our source came through. This contains conversations between Freeman and county officials about the development plans." Sophia plugged the drive into her laptop, immediately scanning the contents. Her eyes widened as she reviewed the files. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "Explicit discussions of using police enforcement to encourage property sales. References to coordinating building code violations with police searches. Direct mentions of targeting specific community leaders to soften resistance." She looked up at Nathan. This isn't just corruption, it's conspiracy, racketeering, federal crimes. Enough to stop tomorrow's operation? Sophia shook her head reluctantly. Not in time. Even with this evidence, the legal machinery moves too slowly. But a smile spread across her face. I've been working on something else. The judge assigned to our emergency motion, Judge Caroline Martinez. She served on the Civil Rights Commission before her appointment to the bench. And, and she's authorized federal observers for tomorrow's operation. Department of Justice officials will be on the ground watching everything that happens. It wasn't prevention, but it was oversight eyes that couldn't be intimidated or ignored. Combined with the community's preparation and the media attention, Thomas had arranged it created a perfect storm of visibility for whatever Freeman and Bennett attempted. There's one more thing, Sophia added. The testimonies from the church event today, they're already being processed for a class action lawsuit. We're filing tomorrow morning naming Bennett Freeman and the entire county power structure as defendants. The timing was perfect, a legal bombshell dropping precisely as Freeman launched his operation. A clear message that the old patterns of intimidation, followed by silence, would no longer protect them. What happens next depends on how they respond tomorrow, Sophia continued. If they proceed with the operation despite federal oversight, they will, Nathan interrupted confidently. They're too committed now, too desperate to regain control. Then they'll overreach, Sophia concluded, and we'll be there to document every moment. Dawn broke over Pine Creek with an eerie calm. Residents waited behind locked doors, instructions memorized, phones charged and ready to record. Nathan positioned himself at the community center, a central location from which he could observe multiple streets and respond quickly to developments. The police arrived precisely at 7 a.m., a convoy of patrol cars, tactical units, and even vehicles from neighboring jurisdictions. A show of overwhelming force meant to intimidate through sheer scale. What they didn't expect was the calm readiness that greeted them. As officers approached homes with warrants, residents responded according to the protocol Nathan had developed, recording everything, questioning politely, but firmly complying with lawful orders while clearly identifying unlawful ones. No shouting, no resistance, just silent dignity and documentation. Nathan moved through the neighborhood, observing occasionally, intervening with a quiet word of support or guidance. His presence alone seemed to moderate officer behavior, a silent witness they couldn't intimidate or provoke. By mid-morning, it was clear the operation was failing to achieve its intended effect. No drugs were being found. No arrests were sticking. Community members were supporting each other, witnessing each encounter, creating a web of accountability that the department hadn't anticipated. And then there were the observers, Department of Justice officials in plainclothes taking notes. News vans from Charleston and Columbia capturing footage. Sophia Lewis moving from scene to scene, questioning officers about their legal authority for specific actions. Sheriff Freeman arrived just before noon, his face a mask of controlled fury as he surveyed the unraveling operation. His gaze locked on Nathan, who stood calmly observing from across the street. Their confrontation occurred in the middle of Pine Creek Road, Freeman approaching with barely contained rage, Nathan waiting with the stillness that had become his signature. "What have you done?" Freeman demanded, voice low but intense. "I haven't done anything," Nathan replied calmly, "except help people remember their rights, their dignity." Freeman glanced around at the media presence, the federal observers, the community members, recording every moment. "This isn't overread, not by a long shot." "Actually," Nathan contradicted gently, "it is. The federal case is being filed as we speak. Class action, RICO charges, civil rights violations, evidence that directly connects you to the development scheme targeting Pine Creek." Freeman's composure slipped, shock replacing anger. "What evidence?" "Everything," Nathan said simply. "The body cam footage you thought was deleted, the conversations with developers about clearing certain blocks, the financial connections through your brother-in-law, Bennett's military record that you buried to get him hired." Each revelation hit Freeman like a physical blow, his face paling as he realized the extent of Nathan's knowledge. "Even if you shut down this operation right now," Nathan continued, "it's too late. The system you built is being dismantled as we speak." Freeman's hand moved toward his weapon, an instinctive reaction quickly suppressed as he remembered the witnesses surrounding them. "You've made a serious mistake, Reed. People like you don't win against people like me." "This isn't about winning," Nathan replied. "It's about justice, about breaking a silence that protected corruption for too long." Freeman turned away without another word, barking orders to nearby officers to begin withdrawing from the neighborhood. The operation was being abandoned not officially, but effectively. Nathan watched as patrol cars began departing, officers clearly confused by the sudden change in direction. The community had held. The strategy had worked. But one person was noticeably absent from the withdrawal. Officer Bennett hadn't been seen all morning despite his central role in Pine Creek enforcement. Nathan's tactical instincts flickered with warning, an unaccounted-for variable in a rapidly evolving situation. His phone vibrated with a text from Martha. "Bennett here, alone. Come now." Martha's house stood quiet in the afternoon sun. No patrol cars visible, no signs of the disturbance that had brought Nathan racing across Pine Creek. He approached cautiously, senses alert for ambush or trap. The front door stood slightly ajar, a deliberate invitation or warning. Nathan pushed it open slowly, scanning the interior before entering. Martha sat in the living room armchair, composed but tense. Across from her, Bennett occupied the sofa, his service weapon resting on the coffee table between them, not pointed at Martha, but present as an implicit threat. "Mom." Nathan acknowledged, moving to stand beside her chair. "Officer Bennett." Bennett looked up, his expression unreadable. "Reed, good of you to join us." "What is this?" Nathan asked, though he already suspected the answer. A last stand, a final attempt to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond Bennett's understanding. "Just a conversation," Bennett replied, "about consequences, about systems, about how silence can be broken in more ways than one." The veiled threat toward Martha wasn't subtle. Nathan remained standing, positioning himself subtly between Bennett and his mother. "The operation's over," Nathan informed him. "Freeman's withdrawing all units. The federal case is being filed today." Bennett's laugh held no humor. "You think I care about Freeman, about cases? This was never about them. This was about order, about knowing your place." "And where exactly is my place, Officer Bennett?" Nathan asked quietly. "Not here," Bennett replied, voice hardening. "Not challenging the natural order of things. Not turning good people against the police who protect them." "Is that what you've been doing, protecting?" Bennett's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand. You can't. What it takes to maintain order, to keep things functioning. Sometimes lines get crossed, but the alternative is chaos." Nathan recognized the justification, the same logic that had been used to rationalize atrocities in war zones around the world. The belief that abuse of power was necessary for the greater good. "There's another way," Nathan countered. "Justice with dignity, enforcement with respect, community with equality." "Fairy tales," Bennett dismissed. "The real world doesn't work that way." "It can," Nathan insisted. "It will. Starting here, starting now." Bennett's hand moved toward his weapon. "Why won't you react? Why won't you get angry, fight back? Why just silence?" The question revealed Bennett's fundamental misunderstanding of Nathan, of power, of strength itself. He could only interpret silence as weakness or submission, not as chosen restraint, not as strategic opposition. "Because your greatest fear isn't my anger," Nathan explained calmly. "It's my dignity, my humanity that can't be diminished by your threats or your badge or your gun." Something shifted in Bennett's expression, a flicker of understanding quickly replaced by desperate resolve. He grabbed his weapon from the table, pointing it directly at Nathan. "Enough talk. You're under arrest." "On what charge?" Nathan asked, making no move to comply. "Interfering with police operations, inciting civil unrest. I'll figure out the details later." Martha spoke for the first time, her voice steady, despite the gun pointed near her son. "You'll have to shoot him first and then me. And explain to those news cameras outside why you murdered 2 unarmed people in their own home." Bennett's gaze darted to the window. "What cameras?" "The ones that have been following Nathan all day," Martha bluffed confidently. "The ones documenting everything for that federal case." Bennett's hand trembled slightly, uncertainty creeping into his posture. "You're lying." Am I? Martha challenged. Are you willing to risk it to bet your freedom, your future on being right about that? The moment stretched tension building as Bennett weighed his options, his desperation battling with self-preservation. Finally, his shoulders slumped to the weapon, lowering slightly. It doesn't matter anyway. Nothing changes. Systems protect themselves. Always have. Always will. Not this time, Nathan countered. This time the silence is broken. The truth is out. The community is standing together. Bennett's laugh was hollow. You really believe that, don't you? That this little crusade of yours will change anything fundamental? I do, Nathan confirmed, because it already has. The fight seemed to drain from Bennett suddenly, his body sagging with the weight of recognition that he had already lost, that the world he understood was transforming before him. I never had a choice, he said quietly, almost to himself. From Iraq to here, following orders, maintaining control. It's all I know. There's always a choice, Nathan replied. I made mine in Syria. You can make yours now. Bennett stared at his weapon, then placed it back on the table, a gesture of defeat rather than surrender. What happens now? Now you leave, Nathan said simply. Turn yourself in to the federal authorities who are overseeing the operation. Tell them what you know about Freeman, about the development scheme, about all of it. Become an informant. Bennett's disgust was evident. A rat. Become part of the solution, Nathan corrected. Start balancing the scales. Bennett stood slowly, retrieving his weapon and holstering it. They'll never let me testify. Freeman has connections. The developers have money. Power protects power. Not when the spotlight gets bright enough, Nathan countered. Not when silence is finally broken. Bennett moved toward the door, pausing to look back at Nathan with a mixture of confusion and reluctant respect. I still don't understand you, Reed. What makes a man choose silence over forced dignity over power? The recognition that real strength doesn't come from controlling others, Nathan replied. It comes from controlling yourself. Bennett nodded once, not agreement, but acknowledgement. Then he was gone, leaving Nathan and Martha alone in the suddenly quiet house. Martha reached for her son's hand. Is it over? This part, Nathan confirmed. The rest is just beginning. The federal investigation moved with unexpected speed, fueled by the evidence Nathan and his allies had gathered. Within days, arrests were made. Sheriff Freeman, 3 county commissioners, the head of Pinecrest Development Corporation, and several officers implicated in the worst abuses. Bennett, true to Nathan's prediction, turned state's evidence-trading testimony for leniency, becoming the key witness that broke the case wide open. 1 month after the failed operation in Pine Creek, Nathan sat in Pastor Williams' office alongside Sophia Lewis Thomas Gray and Martha. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings documenting the unraveling corruption scandal, the federal investigation, the class action lawsuit that promised some measure of restitution for years of abuses. The state is appointing an interim sheriff, Sophia reported, someone from outside the county with a background in community policing reform. And the development plans for Pine Creek, Thomas asked. Frozen pending the outcome of the RICO investigation, Sophia confirmed. The properties that were illegally seized are being returned to their original owners with compensation. Pastor Williams nodded approval. It's a good start, but the real work of healing will take longer. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. That's why we're establishing the Community Oversight Board, Nathan reminded them, giving the people of Pine Creek a voice in how they're policed, how their neighborhood develops. Martha studied her son with quiet pride. And what about you, Nathan? What comes next? It was the question he'd been asking himself since the confrontation with Bennett. His mission in Pinecrest was effectively complete. Justice was being served, systems reformed, accountability established. I'm not sure yet, he admitted, but I'm thinking there are other communities like Pine Creek, other places where silence has been enforced rather than chosen. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. The model you've created here, documentation, community organization, strategic legal action, it could be replicated elsewhere. A template for transformation, Pastor Williams agreed, not through violence or force, but through truth and dignity. Nathan considered the possibility of taking what they'd learned in Pinecrest and applying it where similar injustices festered. Not as a crusade, but as a methodology, a way to help communities find their voices after years of enforced silence. Maybe, he acknowledged, but first I need some time to process, to reflect. Martha squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, you brought something valuable back to Pinecrest. Not just justice, but hope. The word resonated. Hope. Not naive optimism, but the grounded belief that systems could change, that power could be held accountable, that communities could reclaim their dignity. 1 year later, Nathan stood before a different gas station in a different town. The scene was eerily familiar, a police officer aggressively confronting an elderly woman demanding identification, asserting authority without cause. Nathan watched from a distance, recording the encounter on his phone. The officer's badge identified him as Mercer, his demeanor revealing the same entitlement, the same abuse of power that had once characterized Bennett's interactions in Pinecrest. When Mercer began rifling through the woman's purse without consent, Nathan approached not confrontationally, but with deliberate presence. He said nothing, simply stood close enough for the officer to notice him, to feel the weight of being witnessed. Mercer looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Move along, buddy. Police business." Nathan remained silent, phone still recording, eyes steady and unblinking. "You deaf?" Mercer demanded. "I said move along." Still, Nathan said nothing. His silence was not weakness or fear. It was chosen restraint, calculated opposition, the most powerful response to abused authority. Mercer's confidence wavered, uncertainty creeping into his posture as he realized his usual intimidation tactics weren't working. The woman took advantage of his distraction to reclaim her purse, gathering her dignity around her like armor. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Mercer told Nathan, attempting to reassert control. Nathan simply continued, recording his silence, more eloquent than any words could have been. A silent witness, a reminder that power unchecked was no longer the norm, that the old patterns were breaking down. Mercer retreated to his patrol car, casting one last confused glance at Nathan before driving away. The woman approached cautiously. "Thank you," she said. "But who are you?" Nathan smiled slightly, pocketing his phone. "Just someone who understands the power of silence." In the distance, Mercer's patrol car circled back, the officer clearly unsettled by the encounter, by the silent witness who had disrupted his understanding of authority. Nathan watched calmly. This was just the beginning in this town, just as it had been in Pinecrest. The first small crack in a system that had operated too long without accountability. He turned away, walking unhurriedly down the street. His voiceover, if anyone could have heard it, would have been clear and certain. Not shouting, but silence at the right moment can make an entire system stop in its tracks. The end.